Well, we're back. Another episode of the Always About People show. I'm your host, Chris Allen, and we have another great topic to cover today. As I've said before, each week on this show, we try to cover the things that many leaders and many organizations are wrestling with today. We mentioned in our brief description about the show today that in this post-pandemic workplace, many people are struggling to figure out how to motivate their teams, how to motivate individuals. And I think it comes from a place of assumption, this place of assumption where we begin to think, gosh, do people really want to work? Maybe something's wrong with this generation. All people are lazy. Gosh, people just want to earn more. They're going to leave if they can't earn more. And so we've moved into this time where many organizations are trying to figure out which quick fixes can I put in place to try and stop the attrition. Can I just offer short-term incentives? Can I offer bonuses? Do we have to increase compensation? Anything to try and keep people within the organization. And so I'm just excited to unpack this. Been doing a little bit of research myself, and as we work with clients across the country, we're trying to figure out what advice would we give them. And so as I have read and pulled some thoughts together, I want to give you 8 practical steps on how to motivate your team. And I'm hopeful that you can just take one of these and implement it in your business or with your team today. The first place that I want to start, though, is what's your assumption? We talk with many leaders, and a lot of times something will be said like, I just assume that people don't want to work. Now, obviously, we're coming out of the pandemic where many people were given government incentives to stay on the sideline. And while that affected some people, it was needed for some, particularly in our service industries and some other places where they were really hit hard. People needed the help. But there were other places where, again, we've carried that assumption into the way that we view people. And I don't think it's correct, because the truth is, and this is backed up in science and psychology, and it's been written about plenty before, but the truth is that really people do want to work. They want to work hard. They want to be valued for their work. But I think a lot of people think, or at least a lot of people believe, that people dislike work and will avoid it if they can. And I just don't believe that that's true. We've told many leaders before that it's not like people roll out of bed each day and think, gosh, how can I really screw up my organization today? Or how can I do as little as possible today? Most people roll out of bed and think, I want to do something valuable today. I want to be recognized. I want to be noticed. I want to be valued for my contribution. And that's the assumption that we want to take into this conversation. How do I motivate my team? Whether you're watching on LinkedIn, on YouTube, or on Facebook Live right now, I want to encourage you, send in any additional questions you may have. Send in thoughts, comments. We would love to address them while we're live. And so I want to give you that opportunity and just remind you to engage with us today. So once we have this assumption figured out, the assumption is, I really do believe that people in general want to do something worthwhile. They want to be valued for their work, and they want to work. They want to enjoy their work. And so if we lead with that assumption, that leads us into kind of a couple other places. Okay, so how do we motivate a team of people who actually want to come to work and do a good job? I think the reality is most organizations have done a poor job trying to motivate people. Out of the Industrial Revolution and Frederick Winslow Taylor and Taylorism and modern management theory, we tend to believe that in order to motivate people, we do it through sticks and carrots. We do it through a reward system and a penalty system, rewards people for good behavior, penalizes them for doing something against what we want. And so we've carried that into parenting, we've carried it into education, and we've also carried it into the workplace. And so we think that the only way to truly motivate people is to pay them a little bit more. And the reality is that in all research, you need to pay people what is fair, But once compensation is fair, it becomes a lower motivator. What all the research shows and psychology backs up is that the motivators then become what's referred to as intrinsic motivation. If you took Psychology 101 in college or you've read any of the books, this intrinsic motivation comes from within, extrinsic motivation from without. So any sticks and carrots that are used to either reward people or to penalize people are extrinsic motivation. In a book called A Prime to Perform, Neil Doshi and Lindsay McGregor talk about this idea of total motivation, or TOMO, where the intrinsic motivation or the direct motives of play, purpose, potential will ultimately lead to a more balanced ability to be adaptive and tactical at the same time. Whereas the indirect motives of emotional pressure, economic pressure, and inertia lead people to just be tactical, just do what's being asked, check off the box, do the task. In his book called Drive, Daniel Pink talks about a very similar concept of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. He refers to three main ideas that people need autonomy in their work. They need autonomy over their task, their time, their technique, and their team. The second thing that people need is mastery, where he talks about engaging people in something referred to as flow. And we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. And then the third is that people need purpose. They need purpose in their work. And so whether you're reading Daniel Pink or you're reading Neil Doshi, Lindsay McGregor, or any of the other various texts on this idea, the truth is that it's intrinsic motivation that can motivate a team. And so the title of today's episodes was How Do I Motivate a Team? How to motivate a team in this environment. And what I believe is, yes, you can start with a team, but ultimately this gets back to the individual. And so what I want to focus on is, instead of how do you motivate a team, how do you motivate the individual on your team? Because every person is slightly different. And if we refer back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, everybody ultimately needs a sense of purpose, and they're on this quest to get their needs met, from really this sense of self-esteem into love and belonging, and ultimately into what Maslow referred to as self-actualization, becoming the best version of myself. And so if all of that is true, and we take this research and psychology, and we take intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, we take Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and then we just think about what people need in this environment, I just think that there are some really simple, practical steps we can take. And so the first place that I would just encourage you to start, any leaders listening, here's where I would start. Start by establishing a vision for the team. The team itself needs to understand what they believe in, and they ultimately need to believe in something bigger than themselves. And so I want to encourage you to just start with the team in identifying a vision for where this team is going, how the team contributes to a better workplace, how the team contributes to the purpose of the overall organization. But I do believe that casting a vision for the team is the first place to start. But then once you've cast the vision for the team, I believe that this gets down to the individual level. And this is where I want to give you just 8 practical steps. We'll do it quickly, but 8 ideas. And I think what I would just ask you to do is take one and implement it with individuals on your team today. I hope that it will be helpful. Here's the first thought. The first thought is to activate autonomy. Activate autonomy. And what I mean by that is autonomy is the ability for me to actually have some control over how I do my work. And so many people think, and when we think of this scientifically, it was modern management theory and Taylorism that said we need to scientifically engineer every role. And for many new leaders that we talk to, the idea of asserting my authority and my leadership on a team of people by helping them understand how I do my work, how I do it best, and how I believe they should do it, takes away autonomy and is actually more control than anything. And so to activate autonomy, what we need to do as leaders is to say, here's what we're going for. Here's the outcome I'm looking for. Here's the expectation at the end. You have autonomy on how you're going to get it done. Because the reality is that with all of our different strengths and personalities, with all of our different learning styles, we may approach that task differently. And if I have some control over how I do my work, I feel a level of autonomy in that. So state the outcome and then give the individuals on your team the freedom over how to actually do their job. Okay, so that's number one, activate autonomy. Number two is identify the why. Identify the why. And what I mean by that is just simply help people understand why they're doing what they're doing. If I can't and you can't as an individual identify why we're doing what we're doing, it becomes just a task that we do over and over and over again without thinking about it. We tend to respond to those sticks and carrots because it's just this monotony of work. I think in one thought on the monotony of work is if the role and certain jobs and certain functions and certain seasons require a level of monotonous work, if that's the case, I would be really honest as a leader. I would be transparent with the team on, hey, this work is going to be monotonous. Here's why we're going to do it. Here's how long we're going to do it. And again, I think just the vulnerability and transparency will help push through that monotony. But number two, identify the why. Identify the rationale for each of the tasks. And I think one other thought would be help people understand how their specific tasks impact the overall progress or process within the organization. It's amazing how many people we talk to in organizations who don't know how their job affects the ultimate outcome of the organization. So as much as you can do that as a leader, the better. All right, here's number three, create a challenge. Create a challenge for people. And here's what I mean by that. Oftentimes, we can get into this rut of doing the same thing over and over again. And we can, even as leaders, we can lean on our most experienced people, our most skilled people. The reality, though, is that that can become monotonous for those most skilled people, and they just need a new challenge. I was actually on with a leadership team this morning, and just last week, they gave an individual of their team a new challenge, and she completely rose to the occasion. She was so excited. She went above and beyond, not only with what she was asked to do and to learn, but then she took it a step further and went even beyond what she was asked to do, simply because of the challenge and that a challenge had been created for her. Don't be afraid to ask people, hey, can you help me with this? You're creating the challenge in that. And the reality is that all of us have a certain skill level, and the work that we do is a certain challenge level. There are a number of psychologists who have talked about this idea of flow, and it's flow, which is this balance, this healthy balance between your skill level and your challenge level. If the challenge level is too great for you, it creates stress. It creates stress. If, as a person, you are more skilled than the work that you're doing, that creates boredom. So the balance is that we would create just enough challenge for people, slightly more challenging than they're comfortable with. And it's in that place that a person finds themselves in flow. And so again, number three, create a challenge for people. You want to motivate individuals on your team, create a challenge for them. Number four, layer learning. Layer learning. Here's what I mean by that. All of us want to be continuing to learn new things. I just want to encourage you as a leader to look for opportunities to continue training, to continue developing, to continue giving opportunities for people to learn more. Maybe it's learning a new role. Maybe it's learning a new function within the organization. Maybe it's cross-training on somebody else's role. By the way, if that's the case, you're now solving an issue of continuity in your organization. If one person is out sick or on vacation, you've got other people to cover. And most people find motivation in learning something new. I just read an article in the last week of a really high-level senior developer on the Netflix team who all of a sudden quit. He just simply resigned. And the article went on to describe the fact that while he was this highly skilled software developer or engineer, he had become bored. In other words, his skill level was higher than the level of his work, and so he wasn't being challenged. And so he had talked with a number of people, including his direct supervisor, about potentially transitioning over into a product management role within Netflix. Nobody seemed to listen to him. Nobody gave him the opportunity. And so he was stuck in his role. And ultimately, the only way he saw out was to simply resign. And so the organization lost an incredibly skilled individual who simply wanted a new challenge because he wanted to learn something new. And so you want to motivate individuals, find ways of layering their learning, give them new opportunities to learn new things. Here's number 5, provide praise and positive feedback. Again, you might be saying, hey, that's too soft. But I promise you, if people hear some level of praise and positive feedback for their work, they feel valued. Remember from the beginning, we said that the assumption is people actually wake up and want to go do great work, but they want to be valued in the process. One way to value people well, to make them feel like they're a part of the organization and they're a valued member of the team, is to simply provide positive feedback and praise in what they're doing. My encouragement there is to make that praise very specific, make it in the moment. If you're waiting for the annual review to give positive feedback, it will be forgotten. It just won't mean as much. So provide positive feedback and praise. That's number 5. Number 6, move from if then to now that rewards. This is straight from Daniel Pink's book, Drive, and he lays it out pretty simply. Most of the time, when we're trying to motivate individuals, we think of it from an extrinsic perspective. So we think, if you do this, then I will do this. But the recommendation would be that you move to a more intrinsic motivator, which is, hey, how do I connect people with the work itself, the purpose of the work, the learning, the challenge, and everything else? And now that you've done this, I want to reward you. And these rewards don't necessarily have to be financial. They could be praise. They could be positive feedback. They could be something meaningful to the person. Find a way of figuring out their favorite restaurant, their favorite drink, their favorite candy, their favorite dessert. Find a way of rewarding them with something that feels specific to them. They will feel even more value in that. And that will be an incredible motivator to the individuals. So you move from an if then to a now that reward system. Number 7, find the fun. Find the fun. When I say find the fun, some of you probably thought, oh, great, we're going to create this just fun environment with games and beanbag chairs and the right drinks and snacks in the break room. And what I would say is that that has nothing to do with fun. That might create a better environment, but when we think of fun, it's enjoyment of the work itself. You know, most people that I talk to, they got into the career that they're currently in because they enjoyed the work at one point in time. Accountants enjoyed the numbers. They enjoyed solving problems. They got into it. Lawyers, they enjoyed the work itself in law school or in the opportunities that they had to try different aspects of law. Most people start somewhere because of the enjoyment of the work. And then they move into a season where sometimes the work itself can just become monotonous. the work itself can become less motivating because your skill level is higher than challenge level, or the only thing that's motivating is just the system of compensation. So for law and for accounting, it's just, hey, let's bill more. But that actually becomes a demotivating extrinsic factor. And so we have to get back to some of these things that we've been talking about. Find the fun. What's the fun in the work? Return that accountant and that lawyer or anybody else to that place of like, what did you want this work to look like when you were excited about it? What would bring some fun back into this? What are the problems that you love to solve? And connect that individual back to the fun in their work. That's number 7. And number eight, point to the purpose. Point to the purpose, or you could say prioritize the purpose. What's the purpose in this work for you as an individual? What's the purpose of this work within the organizational structure? I was with a leadership team just this last weekend, and we were talking about the purpose of work, and that every leader around this table understands how your work impacts the greater outcome of the organization. But I asked a very simple question. I just asked, do you believe that every individual on the team understands how their work impacts the greater outcome of the organization? And the leaders couldn't really answer that question. They didn't know. I mean, there may be some individuals on the team who understand how their role impacts the greater outcome. But as new people join the team and you're training up people and developing them and potentially putting them in new roles, are you really keeping the purpose of the organization in front of people? Are you helping them to understand the purpose of their role? And then are you helping them understand the purpose in their job for themselves? I think one way would be to just simply engage people in a conversation of what they value most. We've talked about this in prior episodes, but one question would just be simply, hey, what would make this job an amazing experience for you? And the answer to that question oftentimes points to what that individual values the most. And so in individual conversations with people, again, we're talking about how to motivate a team, but how to motivate a team, we should be asking, how do I motivate the individuals on my team? And continuing to point them to a purpose is really important. So again, if I could just do a quick review of where we've come, this whole idea of how to motivate a team needs to start with our own biases, belief systems, and assumptions. And if I assume that most people dislike work and avoid it if they can, then I will create a whole motivation system around sticks and carrots to try and get people to do what I need them to do. But if my assumption is that most people enjoy work and want to be valued in their work, then I can start to get creative about the intrinsic ways that I motivate people and a team to do really great work. Most of these involve me as the leader giving up some level of control and providing a level of autonomy and trust to the people on my team. So we started by just saying, put a vision in front of the team, cast a vision for where we're going. And then I moved quickly into 8 ways to motivate the individual. Number 1, activate autonomy. Number 2, identify the why. Number 3, create a challenge. Number 4, layer learning. Number 5, provide praise and positive feedback. Number 6, move from an if-then culture to a now-that reward system. Number 7, find the fun, enjoy the work. And number 8, point people to a purpose, prioritize that purpose in people's lives. I hope, again, from the beginning of this show, we said, hey, just take one of these. Take one of these ideas, begin to implement it with the individuals on your team. If you're a leader, I would encourage you, have an individual conversation with somebody today and just ask them a few simple questions to see if you can get below the surface. Ask them about what they want to learn next. Ask them about how challenging they feel their work is. Ask them about how enjoyable the work is for them. Ask them about what they believe motivates them. Ask them what they want to learn next. Ask them what level of autonomy they feel in their work. Ask them what you could do more of for them or what you could do less of. Just engage in a conversation with people to get below the surface of just believing that, well, people just want to earn more money. I just need to increase the benefits and increase the incentive compensation and increase compensation as a whole. That's proven to not actually motivate people in this environment. Now, with that said, compensation needs to be fair. And so I would encourage HR departments, people, leaders of teams, make sure that the compensation across your team is at least fair. Yes, we are in a job market where compensation is going up, but I also believe that the market is shifting and is changing. So I just want to encourage you, make sure that the compensation is fair, but then quickly move to some other motivators. And these motivators move to be more intrinsic. Whether you're Daniel Pink talking about autonomy and mastery and purpose, or Neil Doshi talking about play, purpose, potential, emotional pressure, economic pressure, inertia, they term that total motivation. I hope that you were able to take just something practical from today's conversation. I want to remind you, please send in any comments, thoughts, questions. We go live with this show on a weekly basis where we try to cover topics that many people are dealing with in the workplace. We try to address the things that we're hearing from our own clients as they address people issues within the context of their own business. We just bring it here to the show. We try to address those topics with guests or address them ourselves. But we appreciate you joining us each week. Hopefully you took one practical thing from the conversation today, and we'll see you on our next episode of the Always About People show. Thanks for joining us.